This channel's been almost exclusively about maintaining and repairing Tetrakan Portastudios. My long-term aim is to make repair and maintenance videos about every 4-track cassette recorder ever made, just to provide an online resource. Now, one of the consequences for that is at some point I'm going to have made umpteen different videos with different variations of how to change a capstan belt. And for me and for return subscribers, that's going to be somewhat tedious. So to break things up, I'm going to be recording some cover songs and also some original music. This is some original music. This is going to expose you to my taste in music, which centres around weird rock music. That might not be your cup of tea, to which I say tough shit. The backstory with this particular song is that I started recording it about a year ago when I was in my own house. Anyone who's been following the channel for a while will recall I had a pretty bad house fire and my old studio was wrecked. A lot of the stuff in it was wrecked. I'm still in temporary accommodation. The first 3 tracks were recorded on a 424 Mark III, and the 4th one I've recorded on this, and I'll be mixing it on this in a minute. The reason for that is the 424 developed a problem where there was an intermittent popping on the headphone and the line out. I never really got to the bottom of that. I didn't have the schematics at the time. I do have the schematics now, so I can probably go back and fix that, but I just really wanted to get this song done. So this is the 464 that I was working on before. I haven't calibrated the speed, so I've had to kind of turn down the pitch control slightly to get the pitch right, but it does show you that you can start on one Portastudio and move to the other in the middle of the recording, so long as you're willing to make some adjustments with the pitch control or ensure that they're both calibrated. So moving on to recording with this guy, I'm gonna start with drums. Quick tour of the drum kit, kick drum and some of the hardware I got for like 30 quid. Somebody found it in a barn. Rack tom from a different pearls, tenor, brass piccolo there. I think it was about 50 quid. Cheapo stands for the most part. Inexpensive crashes. Not very expensive china, paid a bit more for it. The ride's second hand, but I got the hi-hats new because I'm choosy about how hi-hats sound. Costs like way more than everything else put together. I'm not a drummer. I mean, I can play guitar and bass pretty competently. I like my keys, fairly proficient in those. Drums, you know, by the standard of a real drummer, I'm not much cop. I guess there's going to be some like demos of recording on a Portastudio where people try and get absolutely the best quality that they can out of the machine. I'm not really doing that. I'm looking at this more an exercise in rapidly prototyping a song idea. I've had the Zoom H6 for ages, but I've never used the mid-side midpoint microphone attachment. So I thought I'd try this. I think that the omnidirectional component of that will reproduce this flappy, not tuned, fairly large kick drum quite nicely. Let's put my midpoint mic here-ish. Far enough back that the bass frequencies from the kick drum have got some chance to propagate. I'm thinking of my stereo image here, so the kick's just that side, the snare's just that side. Though in fact, I'll probably disregard the right side of the information and go for the left side of the information, just because there's more physical space there. The snare and the hats are likely to be a little bit dominant, bright, dry hats and a piccolo, whereas if I take this half of the stereo signal, then I'll get more low end coming off the kick and the floor tom. It's going to end up only occupying 1 of 4 tracks on the cassette recorder. In the last few days, when I was still tampering with the 424 trying to get it to work well, I've been having a bit of a fiddle with the bass. Got a little kind of riff and a variation of it and a second variation of it, which I can imagine as a verse, chorus, middle 8, typical sort of song structure. So I'll allow myself maybe 45 minutes or an hour to imagine I'm going through the structure, come up with a part. It's going to need to be fairly simple just because of the limitations of my technique. And then I'll try to record it in 1 take. I'll allow myself 2 or 3 takes. You know, if I make a real balls up, I don't want to put out something that's utterly shite, but I'm not going to redo it for the sake of 1 or 2 little mistakes. Wish me luck. So the first take went alright. I'm glad to be able to keep it. You can see I was very conservative with the levels that I set on the midpoint mic, so I'm really barely bursting above minus 18 decibels, recorded at digital. So in order to get it loud enough, I had to turn this preamp up quite a bit. That's given me quite a bit of background hiss for me to be able to hit the tape hard enough, so kick and snare bursting 3 decibels and 6 decibels. So when you listen back to this, be aware that this isn't showing optimal noise floor for this unit. You can get it quieter. I just kind of screwed up. Don't want to have to redo the drums again. Pretty happy with how that drum track's sounding on the tape, so I'm going to move on to recording the bass. The bass part is the part that I came up with first. I find that when I'm trying to sketch together a song pretty quickly, I'm waiting for inspiration to strike on a certain instrument. When I say inspiration, I don't mean like some kind of dove from above comes down from the clouds and kind of taps me on the shoulder and goes, "It's you! You are the open gateway to the plane of inspiration." I just mean I'll sit on an instrument, usually an instrument that's got like harmonic content, so not a percussion instrument, so it might be bass, it might be guitar, it might be some kind of keyboard instrument. Those are the 3 instruments I play relatively competently. And I'll get some kind of ostinato, some kind of hook, some kind of motif or motive that I feel stands up to repeated playback. And it so happened that I was fiddling about in the bass while I was rendering some of the videos to do with fixing this guy, and I got a little riff on the go, and I was like, yeah, that sounds alright. I'm a shellac fan, which is why I've got these guys, Electrical Guitar Company guitar and bass. That one I bought directly from Kevin Burkett. That one, my mate, he gets tired of gear every 6 months, so I was able to get like a bit of a discount on this guy. It came with the humbuckers, but I spoke to Bob West after a shellac gig, and he was saying that he uses exclusively that pickup, so this has got a single coil in it now. And it's going through this Tronographic Rusty box as a sort of a tone modifier. For this song, it's kind of got like a kind of True Detective sort of feel to it, like an Americana mumble rap, I think is what it's going to end up sounding like. So I've never recorded with my Catlin Bred Add an Echo before. It's based on the oil tank reverb that Fender made. It's got this pure spaghetti western sound to it. So I'm putting it through that, and then I'm just using this Joyo American Sound 20 quid. Probably pound for pound, one of the best bits of gear I own. Depending how you wiggle this pot, it simulates at this end low gain. God, that's me just buggered up the setting I spent ages getting. Never mind. So here's your low gain amp. So whatever you're like Princeton and all that kind of stuff, you turn it that way, and it's more your kind of tweed turned all the way up levels of gain. So I've got it set in the middle for a sort of a bassman kind of thing. And really the main reason I'm using this is as a sort of like cabinet emulation. I mean, it's not marketed as such, but I find if I put that straight into a mixer, tape machine, whatever, it's a little bit harsh, whereas this does to the sound of that what a power amp and 15-inch speakers would do. So yeah, that's my setup, and yeah, get recording, I guess. I'm just about to record the vocals. Here's the setup. I've got heavily annotated lyrics with kind of underlines and brackets and marks, so I remember where to breathe and where to put the emphasis. Coupled the lyrics together in about 20 minutes. Hand holding a TC Hellion dynamic mic. That's going into the back of a Fatman Fat 1 tube compressor. I'm using Vocal Preset 2 to compress it a bit. That signal's then going into Joyo American Sound. distorting the vocal a bit. Getting quite a lot of hiss from that, so I'm using a Donner noise killer. Surprisingly decent noise gate for not much money. And then I've got a lunar echo on it. I'm using the hi-fi mode, which isn't actually very high fidelity. What it means is there's like a low cut on the repeats. It's got this kind of a sort of horror movie sound effect to it. The repeats disappear in this kind of scratchy way, which I think complements the rather grim and nasty doom mumble rap style that I seem to have adopted for this tune. So I just managed to do a take there without hitting record on the phone. But here's roughly what it sounds like going through all those pedals. I guess the way I've got it set up, it's just breaking up very slightly. Probably not the preamp, but I'm getting little peaks of tape saturation for the louder parts. So here's the setup for falling behind keyboards. I didn't have the presence of mind to film myself recording it, but here's roughly what's happening. The sound is from a Yamaha CP. Got pretty good Rhodes sounds in it. I don't have a problem with the mini keys, but there's not enough octaves to play the part, so I've borrowed a 88 key MIDI controller. And although the drive's turned up, it's not enough distortion for me, and I personally like the sound of reverb and echo being distorted a little bit, so I've got this pedal that sounds like a Fox AC30, and that's going into track 4 of the 464. I did do it in one take, however, because this phaser actually makes the sound cut off when you manually turn it off like that, and it happens at a critical point, I did it in 2 sections. So the first section that's got the phaser in it, and then the second section with the phaser out. I actually did the phaser bit second, and unfortunately I cut off the very beginning of the first note when I punched out. So there's a little drop out there that coincides with the only real clanger in any of the performances, which is a really bad bum note in the bass, but at least it proves that I'm using this as a kind of sketching tool, and I'm not putting a huge amount of time into the rehearsal and recording of these. So in terms of the compressor for the mix down, I've got maybe 1.5 dB per octave. The threshold's pretty low. It's applied really heavily to the drums in channel 1 and quite heavily to the fake Rhodes piano in channel 4, but it's not affecting the bass, which has really got its own compression built into it because it's going through a preamp and a distortion pedal, and there's no additional compression in vocals because they were done with a mono-channel tube compressor anyway. I don't have any reverb on this beyond the ambient effects that were printed to the tracks, so with the drums, it was recorded quite live and it's being compressed, so the room ambience that I'm getting from that is sufficient. Bass was going through a pedal that fakes oil can echo, that's a kind of reverb effect. There's some delay on the vocals and there's some distorted reverb and a little bit of analog delay, fake analog delay on the Rhodes piano, so that's giving me enough wetness. I don't feel like I need to run the output through any kind of reverb device, but that would be an option if you were doing something similar. I'm capturing the output of the Tetrakan using my Zoom H6 handy recorder. There are soft limiters in both channels. That's really to just make sure that I don't get any digital pops in case the output goes over 0 decibels coming out with the line outs. So there might be a little extra bit of crunch for that reason at the loudest parts of the song, but I'm not using it as an intentional effect, just as a kind of safety net, so I get as loud a recording into the digital domain as possible.